The last time I saw Hawthorne House in my first life, flames were climbing through my bedroom windows, while my brother, Julian, held me back and swore our mother had died inside. I believed him. I signed the insurance papers, surrendered the property, and spent 2 years blaming myself for leaving her alone. Then I found a photograph proving the fire had been staged, and Julian pushed my car through a guardrail before I could expose him. When I opened my eyes again, the demolition contract was beneath my hand. Julian stood across from me, already smiling. "Sign, Mara. There's nothing left to save." But the date on the document told me the fire had happened only 3 days ago. This time I put down the pen. Before sunset, I drove past the police barriers and returned to the house everyone said had burned beyond recognition. The upstairs windows were dark. Then the curtain in my old bedroom moved, and someone inside turned on the light. Hawthorne House had never been only a house. My grandfather built it above the cliffs, and my mother spent 30 years restoring every carved banister, stained glass panel, and hand-painted ceiling. Julian saw those same rooms as land value. I saw them as proof that our family had once loved one another. That difference made me easy to control. When our father died, he left the property equally to Julian and me, but he gave our mother the right to live there for the rest of her life. Julian wanted to sell to a resort developer. Mother refused. I tried to keep peace between them, believing patience could repair what greed had broken. "Just talk to him," I told her, whenever she called me frightened. "He does not want a conversation, Mara," she said. "He wants my signature." I should have listened. Instead, I accepted a museum job 2 states away and left Julian to manage repairs. He replaced the security company with one he chose, dismissed the long-time groundskeeper, and moved financial records into accounts I could not review. Each time I questioned him, he accused me of distrusting my own brother. Then my mother began forgetting things. She missed appointments, repeated herself, and once called to ask why a strange woman was sleeping in my childhood bedroom. Julian said grief was confusing her. "She needs supervision," he told me, "not another argument." I let him convince me. The night of the fire, Mother called 3 times. I was giving a presentation and silenced my phone. Her final message contained only 4 words. "She is in your room." By the time I arrived, the west side of Hawthorne House was burning. Julian stood barefoot on the lawn, ash on his shirt, shouting that he had tried to reach Mother, but the staircase had collapsed. No body was ever clearly identified. The damage was too severe, and Julian said prolonging the investigation would only deepen our pain. When officials mentioned faulty wiring as a possible cause, he treated possibility like certainty and urged me not to ask questions that could delay the insurance claim. I signed the papers he placed before me. Insurance forms, temporary management authority, and eventually the agreement surrendering my share to cover debts he claimed the fire had revealed. For 2 years, I carried my mother's last message like a punishment. Then a former groundskeeper mailed me a photograph taken the morning after the fire. Julian was standing beside a contractor near the untouched rear entrance. Behind them, through the window of my old bedroom, a woman's hand pressed against the glass. I called Julian and told him I was going to the police. He cried. He apologized. He asked me to meet him alone. On the coastal road, his truck appeared behind mine. The final thing I saw before my car broke through the guardrail was my brother's face reflected in the mirror, calm, certain, and completely without regret. The sound of metal tearing vanished. I woke with my cheek against a polished dining table and the taste of blood gone from my mouth. For several seconds, I could only hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in Hawthorne House. No waves below the cliff, no ambulance sirens, no engine grinding against mine. My hands were younger. My wedding band from a failed marriage I had not yet left was still on my... Across the table, Julian was tapping a demolition contract with one impatient nail. "Sign it, Mara. The insurance company needs proof we are clearing the site." I looked past him. The room smelled faintly of smoke, but the east wing still stood. Through the window, yellow caution tape crossed the lawn. A newspaper lay beside Julian's briefcase. October 9, 3 days after the fire, my mother had been declared dead. The rear wing had been sealed. At 6 that evening, Julian would meet the developer and transfer control of the property under emergency authority. In my first life, I had signed before lunch. Now I remembered the photograph. The woman's hand in my bedroom window had been wearing my mother's jade ring. Julian pushed the pen toward me. "Mara?" I closed the contract. "I need to see the house first." His expression changed so quickly that I almost missed it. "The fire marshal said it is unsafe. Then you can wait." I stood, took the keys from the silver tray, and walked toward the door. Before sunset, I would enter my old bedroom, and if my mother was still alive, I would find out who had been living beside her. Julian's car was already parked beside the caution tape when I reached Hawthorne House. A black SUV stood behind it. I recognized the man waiting near the steps. Grant Mercer, the developer who had purchased the property in my first life before the ashes were cold. Julian walked toward me quickly. "You should not be here. Neither should he." Grant offered a restrained smile. "I am only assessing the site. Before the owners approve demolition." Julian lowered his voice. "Do not embarrass us in front of people trying to help." That was exactly what he had said before. In my first life, I had apologized to Grant, signed the contract, and thanked both men for handling decisions I was too grief-stricken to understand. This time, I took out my phone. "Say that again." Julian stared at the camera. "Put it away. The contract requires both our signatures. I am documenting that I do not consent to demolition or transfer." Grant's expression tightened. "Your brother said the decision was settled." My brother was mistaken. Julian stepped between me and the house. "The structure is dangerous. Mother is dead. Going inside will not change either fact." My gaze moved to the rear wing. The stone walls were smoke-stained but standing. A narrow electrical cable ran beneath the kitchen door. Someone had connected it to a portable generator hidden behind the hedge. Dead houses did not need electricity. I ducked beneath the caution tape. Julian grabbed my arm. "Mara!" I looked down at his hand until he released me. "If the house is too dangerous to enter," I said, "why was someone here long enough to install power?" Grant turned toward Julian. "You said the utilities were disconnected." "They are." "Then what is that?" Julian did not answer. I climbed the rear steps and tried my key. The lock had been changed, but the window beside the door was unbroken. Through the glass, I saw a grocery bag on the floor and a clean pair of women's shoes beneath the coat rack. Not fire debris, not rescue equipment. Someone was living there. Julian came up behind me. "Those belong to the insurance investigators. Investigators do not usually bring fresh bread and bedroom slippers." His face hardened. "You are not thinking clearly." He wanted anger. He wanted me shouting in front of Grant so he could call me unstable again. Instead, I photographed the shoes, the cable, and the untouched lock. Then I called the county office listed on the inspection notice and asked whether anyone had permission to occupy the property. Julian's confidence finally cracked. "You are making this worse for everyone." "For whom?" Before he could answer, a sound came from the second floor. 3 slow knocks. I stepped back into the yard and looked up. The curtain in my bedroom moved. A woman stood behind the glass, pale and motionless. I could not see her face clearly, but I saw the jade ring on her raised hand. Julian whispered, "Do not call out to her." That was the moment I knew he had never believed our mother died in the fire. I raised my phone toward the window. "Mom?" The woman disappeared. Julian lunged for the front steps, but I blocked his path and sent every photograph to myself, my attorney, and the county investigator. Then I looked at Grant. "The demolition is cancelled." He glanced at Julian, realizing too late that the property he had been promised was not his to buy. Julian watched me walk back to my car and mistook my departure for fear. He did not know I was leaving to bring witnesses. I drove straight to the county administration building and asked for the investigator assigned to the fire. Detective Lena Ortiz met me in a narrow interview room. I showed her the photographs, the generator cable, the shoes, and the figure behind my bedroom window. "You are certain that was your mother's ring?" she asked. I helped her choose it. Ortiz studied the demolition contract. "Your brother reported that no one remained inside after the fire. He lied. Saying it aloud closed something in me that grief had kept open for years. With my written objection, the county placed an immediate hold on demolition until the property could be inspected again. Ortiz requested a welfare check, though damaged floors and sealed rooms would slow entry. I called my attorney next. "Revoke every temporary authority I gave Julian after the fire," I said. "No sale, demolition, or insurance settlement without my written consent. Those documents are already prepared. Then file the revocation today." By mid-afternoon, Julian's power over the property existed only in the story he had told Grant Mercer. I also contacted Mrs. Holloway, our former groundskeeper, and asked her to meet me outside the estate. In my first life, she had sent the photograph too late. This time, I would not leave her alone with what she knew. When I returned to Hawthorne House, 2 county vehicles were parked on the lawn. Julian stood near the gate, furious. "You brought police to our mother's grave." "No." "I brought witnesses to a house you were trying to erase." Ortiz handed him the hold notice. Grant's SUV was gone. Julian read the page twice. "You have no idea what you are interfering with." "Then explain it." He looked toward the upper floor. A crash sounded from my bedroom. One officer moved toward the house, but Julian seized the gate with both hands. "She is sick," he said. The words escaped before he could stop them. Ortiz turned to him. "Who is sick?" Julian said nothing. Then from behind the scorched wall, a woman began screaming my name. The scream stopped before the officers reached the second floor. Ortiz ordered Julian to remain outside while firefighters tested the rear staircase. I followed only after they confirmed the steps could hold us. Smoke blackened the walls, but the damage narrowed near the west hall, as if the fire had been guided toward the rooms containing our family records. My bedroom door was locked from the outside. One firefighter forced it open. The bed had been slept in. Fresh clothes hung in my closet. A half-empty cup of tea sat beside cosmetics I had never owned. But the woman from the window was gone. Then another cry came from behind the paneled wall. I remembered the narrow dressing room my grandfather had concealed during the house's restoration. The latch was hidden beneath a carved rose. When I pressed it, the panel opened. My mother was curled on the floor inside. She was alive. At the hospital, doctors treated her for dehydration and smoke exposure while they evaluated her confusion. Ortiz warned me not to question her aggressively. "She may remember in fragments," she said. "Do not fill the gaps for her." That was harder than facing Julian. Mother woke near midnight and gripped my wrist. "The woman in your room," she whispered. "She took my clothes." "Who was she?" Her eyes moved toward the door. Julian called her Vivian. Then she became too frightened to continue. I did not know anyone named Vivian. By morning, Julian had hired an attorney and claimed he hid Mother in the dressing room to protect her from falling debris. He said the stranger in my bedroom was a private caregiver who fled during the fire. Ortiz did not believe him. Belief was not evidence, so I began building what we lacked. Mrs. Holloway met me at a diner outside town. She brought maintenance logs showing Julian had ordered the rear cameras disconnected 6 weeks earlier. She also remembered a dark-haired woman receiving groceries under the name Vivian Cole. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I tried. Your brother said your mother was ill and you wanted no visitors." Then he dismissed me. The shame that rose in me belonged to the daughter who accepted explanations because challenging them felt disloyal. I placed my hand over hers. "You were not the one who abandoned her." Next, I contacted an independent fire investigator. He agreed to inspect the property once the county released the scene, but warned that cleanup work Julian authorized had already disturbed part of it. Someone had begun erasing the house before the ashes cooled. My attorney filed notices preventing any sale, insurance distribution, or structural alteration without review. I moved Mother to a protected rehabilitation facility under a private registration, then rented an apartment nearby instead of returning to my husband, who had sent 3 messages asking why I was creating family drama. For once, I did not explain myself. The difficult choice came that afternoon. Ortiz asked whether I would permit a complete search of Hawthorne House, including sealed rooms and Mother's private papers. It meant surrendering control of the place I was trying to protect. I signed the consent. "Find Vivian," I said. At 6:40 p.m., the search team opened the false bottom of my old wardrobe. Inside were copies of Mother's signature, photographs of me taken from across the street, and a key card from the Seabrook Hotel. The card had been used that morning. Whoever had lived in my bedroom had escaped and was still close enough to finish what she started. Julian did not collapse when the house was searched. He adapted. By the following afternoon, his attorney submitted a folder of documents claiming Mother had voluntarily hired Vivian Cole as a live-in caregiver. The folder included expense records, handwritten instructions, and a recorded statement in which Mother appeared to say that I had approved everything. Because Mother's memory was now uncertain, Julian treated her confusion as his protection. "This is a family dispute," he told reporters outside the county building. "My sister is using our mother's illness to attack me over property." Grant Mercer returned before sunset. He met Julian at the Seabrook Hotel, where Vivian was waiting in a suite overlooking the harbor. She wore one of my coats, her hair cut to the same length as mine. Photographs of my face covered the desk beside pages of my handwriting. Julian poured champagne. "The police found an elderly woman being cared for," he said. "Nothing more." "They found the copies," Vivian replied. "Copies are not a crime unless they prove what we intended to do." Grant looked uneasy. "Mara blocked the transfer. Temporarily," Julian said. "Once Mother is declared unable to manage the property, the authority returns to me." Vivian lifted her glass. "And the insurance payment?" "Still waiting." For the first time since the fire, they allowed themselves to celebrate. Julian believed my grief would make me reckless. Vivian believed that wearing my clothes, studying my voice, and sleeping in my bedroom had made her convincing enough to become me whenever a signature or recorded approval was needed. They misunderstood my silence as uncertainty, but 3 small problems had already appeared. The independent investigator found evidence that the fire had started in 2 separate areas. Mrs. Hoy identified Vivian from the grocery deliveries, and Mother had repeated one sentence during her evaluation. She practiced your smile in the mirror. That evening, Ortiz and I went to the Seabrook Hotel. The desk clerk examined Vivian's photograph and nodded. She checked in 3 weeks ago. Under what name? Ortiz asked. The clerk turned the registration screen toward us. The guest had not used the name Vivian Cole. She had checked into the hotel as Mara Hawthorne. The hotel manager preserved the registration file, while Ortiz requested the security footage. Vivian had checked in using a copy of my driver's license and an email address built from my full name. The photograph was mine, the signature was not. "She did not choose your name for privacy," Ortiz said. "She chose it because she has been using it." The manager opened a folder of meeting room reservations. Vivian had booked the hotel's private conference suite 4 times during the 6 weeks before the fire. Each reservation was listed under Mara Hawthorne. On the first recording, she sat with her back to the window, wearing my blue museum jacket. Her hair covered part of her face. Grant Mercer appeared on the screen. "I approve Julian handling the negotiations," Vivian said in a careful version of my voice. "My mother is confused, and I do not want the property delayed because of her." Grant did not ask her to show identification. He already knew who she was. The second recording was worse. Vivian spoke to an insurance representative about the condition of the house and confirmed that I had removed valuable family items before the fire. That lie explained why several missing paintings had never appeared on Julian's claim. He had not lost them. He had sold them. The final call had taken place the morning before the fire. Julian entered the hotel conference room carrying a folder. Vivian signed 3 pages while he corrected the angle of her hand. Ortiz paused the footage. The top page was an authorization to let Julian act for both owners during an emergency. The second supported moving mother into long-term care. The third acknowledged Grant's development offer. They had not planned to forge one signature after the fire. They had spent weeks creating a second version of me. I remembered the clothes in my closet, the photographs across Vivian's desk, and Mother's frightened sentence. "She practiced your smile in the mirror." Vivian had lived in my bedroom because it contained everything she needed to study me. Old letters, photographs, recordings, and the private habits no stranger could learn from a file. "The fire was not only meant to force the sale," I said. "It was meant to destroy whatever proved there had been 2 of us." Ortiz nodded. "And once your mother was declared unreliable, Julian could say she confused the caregiver with you. The plan was colder than I had imagined. My mother's failing memory was not an obstacle. It was part of their evidence." Then the manager found one more reservation. Vivian had booked the conference suite for noon that day, under my name. The listed guest was a representative from the company holding Hawthorne House's insurance funds. It was already 11:26. Ortiz reached for her phone, but I stopped her long enough to point at the reservation notes. Vivian was not coming alone. Julian had added my mother as the second signer. At 11:48, Ortiz entered the Seabrook conference suite with 2 officers while I waited in the hall. Vivian sat beneath my name on the reservation card. Grant stood beside an insurance representative, and Julian had arranged 2 folders at the center of the table. The second chair was empty. "Where is Evelyn Hawthorne?" the representative asked. Julian checked his watch. "My mother's caregiver is bringing her." No one was bringing Mother anywhere. The rehabilitation facility had confirmed that only I and her physician could authorize visitors. Julian's request had been denied 20 minutes earlier. When Ortiz entered, Vivian rose too quickly. "This meeting is over," the representative said. "After seeing the identity complaint and hotel records, the insurance funds remain frozen until ownership is reviewed." Julian turned toward Grant. "You said the documents were enough." Grant stepped away. "You said Mara would never challenge them." For the first time, Julian heard how little loyalty his allies had purchased. Vivian tried to leave through the service corridor. Officers stopped her with the forged license in her handbag. She asked for an attorney and looked at Julian as though he were already a stranger. While they turned on one another, I sat beside Mother in the rehabilitation garden. She could not remember every date, but she remembered fear. "Your brother said you were too busy to come," she whispered. "Vivian answered your phone. She wore your perfume, so I would stop asking questions. I should have come sooner." Mother tightened her fingers around mine. "You came now." That sentence did not erase my guilt, but it stopped guilt from guiding my next decision. I authorized repairs only, to stabilize Hawthorne House, not prepare it for sale. Mrs. Holloway agreed to return as property manager. The independent investigator documented 2 fire origins, and my attorney found invoices showing Julian had removed paintings, furniture, and family records before the flames began. Then the consequences widened. The insurer suspended payment. Grant withdrew his offer. A preservation foundation cancelled the grant Julian planned to claim after demolition. Without those funds, debts hidden under the property accounts came due. He called me once. "You are destroying everything Father left us." "No," I said. "I am learning what you already destroyed." "You changed tactics. You cannot maintain that house alone. You left, I stayed. You stayed long enough to empty it." I hung up. By evening, Ortiz told me, Vivian had begun protecting herself. She claimed Julian recruited her from a theater company, paid her to study me, and promised part of the insurance money. She also said the fire was never supposed to spread to Mother's room. Julian denied everything, but denial no longer repaired the cracks. He had lost the sale, the insurance funds, Grant's confidence, Vivian's silence, and control over Mother. What frightened him most was discovering that everything he dismissed as my sentiment, the maintenance records, preservation filings, staff loyalty, and ownership history, was exactly what kept Hawthorne House from becoming his. The next morning, he filed an emergency petition claiming I was exploiting Mother's condition and endangering a historic property. He requested a public competency hearing at the county courthouse. If he could not impersonate me in private, he intended to discredit me. In front of everyone, the county courtroom was full before the hearing began. Reporters filled the back benches. Preservation officials, neighbors, and former Hawthorne employees lined the walls. Julian sat beside his attorney with the expression of a man certain that public sympathy would finish what private deception had started. His attorney rose first. "Mara Hawthorne abandoned this property for years, returned after a tragedy, and has since blocked repairs, frozen insurance funds, and isolated an elderly woman from her son. We ask the court to appoint Julian Hawthorne as sole temporary decision-maker." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Hawthorne?" I stood. "My brother is asking for control over a house he tried to sell using a woman trained to impersonate me." Julian shook his head. "That is absurd." Ortiz presented the first evidence, the Seabrook registration under my name, the forged license, and footage showing Vivian signing documents while Julian coached her. His attorney objected. "Those recordings do not prove Mr. Hawthorne ordered a fire or intended fraud." "No," I said. "They prove he needed a false version of me before the fire." I placed the maintenance records on the clerk's table. Mrs. Holloway testified that Julian had disconnected the rear cameras, dismissed staff, and moved a stranger into my bedroom. The independent investigator followed with photographs showing 2 points of ignition and cleanup begun before the scene was released. Julian leaned toward his microphone. "Mara is twisting every decision I made while caring for our mother." Then Mother entered. She walked slowly beside her physician, but she did not look confused. The judge reminded everyone that memory limitations did not prevent her from describing what she personally recalled. Mother faced Julian. "You told me Mara had stopped loving me," she said. "You made Vivian wear her clothes and answer when I called my daughter's name." Julian's certainty broke. "Mom, you are not well. I know enough to recognize the son who locked my door." The final evidence came from the insurer. A recorded call in Vivian's voice, made under my identity, authorizing the removal of valuables before the fire. Payment records led to an account controlled by Julian. The judge denied his petition, suspended his authority over all family property, and referred the evidence for further investigation. Julian looked at me as if I had taken something from him, but the courtroom understood the truth. I had never been fighting to save our family home. He had been fighting to erase everyone who could prove it was never his alone. Julian asked to see me before he was transferred from the county holding room. He sat behind the glass without his tailored coat, his hands folded as if calm could restore the brother I once believed in. "I never meant for Mother to be trapped," he said. "The fire spread farther than planned." "You planned enough." His eyes lowered. "I was trying to save what was left. The debts, the house, Father's expectations. I could not carry all of it. So you made everyone else carry the cost." He looked at me then. "I am still your brother. For most of my life, those words had been enough to make me forgive before anyone changed. This time, they were only true." "I know," I said. "That is why this hurts." He pressed his palm against the glass. "Tell them you believe me. Help me make this right. I believe you regret being caught. I do not believe regret can return Mother's safety, my identity, or the life you took from me." His hand slowly fell. "I forgive myself for trusting you," I said, "but I will never protect you from the truth again." Then I stood and walked away, leaving Julian with the one consequence he had always feared most. No one left to blame. 6 months later, Hawthorne House opened its doors again. The West Wing remained scarred, not hidden, as proof of what had nearly been erased. Mother chose the room overlooking the garden, and Mrs. Holloway filled the halls with fresh flowers every Monday. I turned my old bedroom into a small archive for the letters, photographs, and records that had survived the fire. On the final shelf, I placed the jade ring Mother once raised toward the window. The house no longer felt haunted by the life Julian tried to steal. It felt honest. When I locked the front door that evening, the key rested easily in my hand. For the first time, Hawthorne House belonged to no one's lie.